Throughout rallying history, the UK has always had a big presence, from drivers coming through the ranks such as Colin McRae, Richard Burns, Chris Meek and Elfyn Evans, to even hosting rallies throughout the years, with the Rally of Great Britain being one of the cornerstones for the pinnacle of this discipline, the WRC. The rally has often had a reputation for its forest muddy stages, thanks in large to the traditional British weather, which due to it usually taking place at the end of autumn and right at the brink of winter, would normally play host to the final round of the season, with the rally often setting the scene for a titanic title decider. Throughout the majority of the 2000s, the rally would mostly be based in Wales, with the rally sometimes concluding at the famous Margam Park, a stage in which the likes of Richard Burns and Petter Solberg would celebrate their title wins. Throughout the last few years of the rally's existence, it didn't play host to the season finale, but despite that, the rally still provided some exciting moments. But for the last 6 years, the WRC hasn't visited the country, which has often left a sour taste in people's mouths, with many clamouring for the rally to return. But why hasn't the WRC been rallying in the UK for the last few years? In this video, I will go through the rally's history, why it was booted off the calendar, and why I believe it should return. So without further hold up, let's get cracking. The history of the GB Rally predates way before the World Rally Championship even began, with the first rally being held in 1932 under the name the RAC Rally, named after the British motoring club that would run the rally for many years to come. The rally would comprise of over 340 participants, with them all starting from a different point in the country, ranging from the likes of London, Newcastle, Norwich, Liverpool and Edinburgh to name a few, with the aim of reaching the event's endpoint, which was located in Torquay. The event wouldn't have any competitive element to it, other than getting to a checkpoint within a certain time, which is why the event saw no winner being declared, with the only honour being that you completed the rally. Despite the non-competitive element, the rally would prove to be a success, and as a result, it would end up becoming an annual event, following the same format from the inaugural rally, with the only difference being that each year would have a different endpoint, that would range from the likes of Hastings in East Sussex, and also the seaside and coastal areas of Blackpool and Brighton. 7-0. The outbreak of the Second World War would put the event on hold after the 1939 running, and it wouldn't be until 12 years later in 1951 that the event would start up again, once again retaining the road journey format, with the event this time finishing off in Bournemouth, a place which as a Forest fan gives me nightmares. Sorry, I've gone off topic again, this is a motorsport channel. Throughout the rest of the decade, the rally would continue to use this format, even in 1953 when it was part of the European Rally Championship, which in turn saw the event declare its first ever winner, courtesy of Ian Appleyard in his Jaguar XK120. But by the time the 1960s arrived, the format would see a dramatic change, addressing criticism that was made by fans suggesting that the rally was nothing more than a navigational treasure hunt, sprinkled in with a few speed tests that meant nothing, even despite the rally being moved back to a November date in 1959, something that would become a tradition in the years afterwards, in an attempt to throw in some cold and wintry conditions to spice up the event. The change that was brought about by the event's organising secretary Jack Kelmsley would see the speed tests that were often timed by the stopwatch have more importance than the idea of finding your way around the UK to the rally's endpoint in the quickest way possible. These speed tests would often take place on gravelly forest roads, which came about due to Jack Kelmsley being able to get clearance by the UK's Forestry Commission to use these roads. As the decade went on, more and more speed tests were being added to the event schedule, with there being up to 57 speed tests by the mid-1960s, by which point they had been renamed to just simply special stages, and it would be these special stages that would end up determining the final classification for the rally, something that still continues to be used to this very day. The start of the 1970s would see the World Rally Championship set up, specifically in 1973, with the RAC Rally being a part of the championship, thus becoming a staple of the World Rally calendar along with Monte Carlo, Sweden and Corsica. The inaugural season would see the rally host the penultimate round of the season, maintaining its mid-November date, but it wouldn't be until 2 years later in 1975 that it would start to host the championship's final round, and from there, apart from the odd few times in 77, 79 and even the first year of the 1980s, the championship's conclusion would always culminate at the RAC Rally, with the rally itself as the years went on often setting the scene for the title decider, with many memorable moments including Colin McRae's title win in 1995 where he would beat his teammate Carlos Sainz by just 5 points, Tommy Mäkinen and Carlos Sainz's title fight in 1998 where both of them would have their own dramas, with Sainz as being the most notable where he would ground to a halt just meters away from the end of the rally, and also the title deciders in both 2001 and 2003 where both of them would have 4 drivers heading into the final round with a mathematical chance of winning the title, with both of them ending up being won by a Subaru, with Richard Burns winning it in 2001, taking advantage of Colin McRae's crash early on in the rally, and Petter Solberg winning it in 2003, having not led the championship all year, to beat Sebastian Loeb by just 1 point. Throughout the 80s and 90s, the rally would often take place across England and Wales, with the stages in England mostly taking place on tarmac, which often features some unique spectator stages such as Silverstone, Donington, Cheltenham and even Woollerton Park in Nottingham, whilst the stages in Wales would often take place around forestry gravel roads, with the final stage in the back end of the 90s often culminating at Margam Park in South Wales, with the castle usually set in the backdrop for many driver and co-driver celebrations. It was during that time that the rally would change its name from the RAC Rally to the Rally of Great Britain, although this wouldn't last too long, as due to the entirety of the rally being moved to Wales at the turn of the millennium, the event a few years later in 2003 would change its name to Wales Rally GB, with the name being continued to use in the years afterwards, apart from in 2009 when it would briefly revert back to the Rally of Great Britain name, even though the event was still only taking place in Wales. Despite this though, the rally would still prove to be exciting, and apart from 2004 and 2005, where it would briefly move forward to a September date, it would continue to set the stage for title deciders in the years afterwards, with 2007 and 2009 being examples of this, 2009 being the more exciting of the two, and also 2011, which had an anticlimactic ending, with Hirvonen retiring on day 1, whilst Loeb, who had already won the title at this point, would crash out on the final day thanks to a road collision with a motorist. After briefly losing its spot as the final round in 2012, being once again pushed forward to a September date, the rally would fully lose its final round status in 2016, being reduced to either hosting the penultimate or third to last round of the championship, but the event would still decide the championship one more time in 2017, when Sebastian Ogier would win his 5th world title and his first for Ford with just a round to spare. With it losing its status as the final round, the event kind of lost some of its appeal, but even despite this, the rally would still pull in decent numbers for both the 2018 and 2019 editions of the event. But little did we know at the time that the 2019 edition would end up being the last time that the WRC would visit the UK. The event was originally scheduled to host around the championship in 2020, but like with other events that were scheduled that year, the rally would end up getting cancelled as a result of the pandemic that would dominate the beginning of the 2020s, with the championship only comprising of 7 rounds as a result. The event was scheduled to return for 2021, but even before the pandemic occurred, there was already concern surrounding the future of the GB round, as organisers of the event were looking to relocate the rally away from Wales due to the Welsh Government looking to withdraw funding from the event. The initial plan was for the event to relocate to Northern Ireland from the start of 2021, but thanks to the pandemic taking its toll, this wouldn't end up happening, and as a result, the GB round was omitted from the 2021 season, being replaced with the Ypres rally in Belgium. Despite attempts for the event to happen in 2022, nothing would ever materialise, and as I sit here now in November 2025, the GB Rally has not appeared on the calendar for 6 years at this point, and that for me is a really sad sight. Now forgive me for the British bias here, but I think a lot of people would agree that the sport could really benefit with a return to the UK, and I think there are two very good reasons why the event needs to return. Firstly, and this may come as a surprise, but the UK is still very popular when it comes to the rallying scene. Okay, not as popular as what it was in the 80s, 90s and early 2000s, but it still has a very good presence nonetheless, as proved with the amount of people that attend rounds of the British Rally Championship, as whilst not as popular as what it was when the series had the F2 kit cars, it still gets a reasonable turnout, helped also by the fact that highlights of the championship are shown on free-to-air on the UK channel ITV4, which fun fact is actually presented by Holly McRae, daughter of the late Colin McRae. So if the British Rally Championship is able to pull off a decent crowd, then there's surely no reason why the WRC can't do that on a grander scale. There's also more proof that the UK still has a big presence in rallying, but we will get to that later. But the other good reason why this event needs to come back is a pretty obvious one if you've been watching the WRC this year. There is a Brit in the field who actually has a good chance of winning the championship this year. This guy, Elfyn Evans, who at the time of recording actually leads the championship by 3 points ahead of Sébastien Ogier with just 1 round to go. As we have seen with many other motorsports around the world, having a driver or rider from a certain country do well in a certain series is going to put eyes on that product. It's happened in F1 over in the Netherlands with Max Verstappen, it's happened with IndyCar over in Spain with Alex Palou, and it's even happened with MotoGP over in Portugal with Miguel Oliveira. Granted, he's nowhere near as successful as both Verstappen and Palou, but if you are the third biggest star in Portugal, behind footballers Cristiano Ronaldo and Bruno Fernandes, you must be doing something right. Evans has been a frontrunner in the WRC for close to nearly a decade now, and heading into the final round in Saudi Arabia, he is looking for redemption after pretty much bottling the championship in 2020 to Sébastien Ogier at the final event in Monza, which makes it ironic that Sébastien is the one chasing him down this year. If Elfyn does go on to win the championship, which would make him the first Brit to win since Richard Burns in 2001, then there's surely no excuse for the series not to have a British rally at some point, because surely Evans would want to celebrate his success in front of his home crowd. Out of the 2 reasons I've given, this one for me is the main one, but even with that said, let's draw our attention to the question that this video title is about. Does anyone actually care? Well, if you ask the Welsh Government, they would probably say no, as let's not forget of course, they were the ones that led to the UK not having a round in the championship, as they withdrew funding from the event, which led to a frenzy in trying to relocate the venue, which thanks to the pandemic in 2020, tore those plans apart. But if you ask anyone else, they will most likely say they do care, as proved by the turnout the British Rally Championship gets, and also the turnout the European Rally Championship gets, which leads us back to the point I made that there was more proof that the UK still has a big presence in rallying. Since last year, the European Rally Championship has hosted a round here in the UK, specifically at Aberystwyth in Wales for the Rally Ceredigion. And as you can see from this footage, you can see a decent sized crowd during this spectator stage. And it should be worth noting that the European Rally Championship is run by the same promoters that run the World Rally Championship, hence why the logos for both series have the same style, which suggests to me at least that the WRC, despite the number of years, do actually care about bringing the series back to the UK, helped further by the fact that there has been a recent bid that's been put in to try and bring the World Rally Championship back to the UK as early as 2027. Which comes courtesy of Aberdeen in Scotland. Now sure, whilst that isn't the rally's usual home in Wales, having it in Scotland wouldn't be a bad thing in my opinion, especially given that the Welsh Government doesn't seem to give that much of a damn. Besides, Scotland, like with Wales, also has a big presence in rallying, I mean, it is where the late great Colin McRae was born, and it's also where he got his start in rallying, so there's obviously a lot of history attached to this country. Whether Aberdeen's bid ends up being successful though is another question, so for those of us clamouring for a UK rally to return to the calendar, we can only hope and pray that it ends up getting the green light, because if it doesn't, then I honestly can't see where the future of the British rally goes from here. Anyways, those are my thoughts on the whole thing and why I believe it needs to make a return. Let me know your opinions in the comments below, and I'll see you in 3 weeks time for the next video. Till then, take care.